be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
Hello guys, DCHL Devin here, giving you another how to play, how to buy video. And today I'm going to go ahead and go into a faction that I absolutely love. The models are gorgeous and the rules are fantastic. It is the Far Harad faction. This is the Mahud, as they're also known in their profiles. Luckily, this is actually a pretty small faction with a lot of really obvious weaknesses and a lot of really obvious strengths. Surprisingly, in the Middle Earth SBG version of this game, they have given these guys a massive power boost. And so they are actually what I would call a competitive faction. So we're going to go into the pros, the cons, and how to play this army, and of course, the how to buy. So let's go ahead and get right into it with the pros of this army. And the first one we gotta mention is the high offensive power of this army. We're talking about strength 4 across the board, no less than that, on their main core troops and on their cavalry models. And what's unique on their cavalry models is they're one of two only strength 4 models in the game on a cav with a lance. That's important because with a defensive 6, which is generally the average high defense value of most armies, you are often piercing them on a 4+ because you would need a 5 naturally to wound and then a 4. Every other cavalry model with a lance generally has strength 3, so they can only do it on 5s. Iron Hill's Goat Riders are the only ones that also have this type of ability. So that makes your Camels extremely powerful on the charge. It makes your Mahud warriors very devastating if they ever get to strike. And then, of course, you have to mention the half-trolls and the Mummakill. Mummakill speak for themselves. They're giant elephants, so they destroy everything that they touch. And half-trolls are effectively mini-captains at a third of the price. So you have a lot of offensive power in this list. Even your heroes don't let up. With 3 attack, fight 5, strength 5 heroes like the Mahud King at a pretty bargain price. So that is definitely a pro in this army. The next thing we have to mention is your strong elite models. Now we touched on it for a bit, but we really didn't go into how powerful these guys are, and we will throughout this video. The Camels are capable of killing in the move phase, and they can kill easily 4 times their points value on a single camel just by running into things. Their impact hits that they cause can devastate opposing armies, and then the half-trolls, like I said, mini captains in a third of the price of a captain. Effectively, think of captain stats, but just without the might, will, fate. They are absolutely brutal and can take on even heroes. So this is something that we definitely have to take advantage of when using this faction. It is hard hitting as hell. The impact hits are also a great way to kill heroes. So instead of dealing with heroes in the fight phase, where often their higher fight value and multiple attacks can destroy you, just kill them in the move phase, where you can just simply run into them with multiple camels. You'll not only likely dismount them, which will prevent them from striking anyway, but you'll also keep getting a chance to cause a strength 4 hit, which will usually need about a 6 to kill the opposing hero. With enough of those, you can actually kill them before the fight even starts. This is a major advantage on your side. So the next thing we have to mention about this faction is a strong mid-range. Now, you have no bows in this faction, so you don't have the 24 inches or anything to bring your opponent to you. But, however, if your opponent is coming to you anyway, then they're going to be dismayed to hear that every single model in your army, well, except for the half-trolls, can be armed with blowpipes. There is no bow limit on blowpipes, and they have a 12-inch range with a strength 2. They are poisoned as well, which means you can combine it with the Betrayer to make it more effective. And the Betrayer is a ring wraith in the Harad faction, and they are a historical alliance, so it works out well. But even if you don't do that, this generally means you're going to have about 36 blowpipes. So you're going to have the ability to shoot at them as they start to close in, and then honestly with a 3-up shoot value, you're probably not going to have an issue moving back a little bit and firing again. They do move half speed and still fire. So this allows you to dump a lot of shots into a front rank or back rank if they start to move toward you. Even if you have to move toward them, a lot of people still won't be able to handle the firepower too much, and you can drag people out of the woods and out of situations. Maybe they're castling somewhere where you wouldn't normally want them to be. So now we go into the army bonus for this faction. Now, I will absolutely admit to you if I feel an army bonus is garbage. And there are some factions where, I mean, I couldn't honestly vouch for it, but this is not one of those. This army bonus is fantastic. It allows you to make your troops fearless if one of your heroes is in combat within 6 inches of them. This mitigates one of the key weaknesses that we'll go into later, which is the courage values. You can become fearless in multiple sections of the combat. You just got to make sure your heroes who have might and will to make sure they pass their own courage checks get in there. Now, of course, if you're fighting an army that has lots of terror but then has a few pocket things that are not terrifying, you could just charge your tribe masters or lower tier heroes into the combats with those non-terrifying models, and then everything else will still become tier fearless anyway. So if you're fighting, let's say, Army of the Dead, you could charge into Aragorn, just an easy example, but probably not always the best idea, but you could, and then the rest of the Army of the Dead is no problem with their terror because you can charge right into them as you are fearless. This gets a little bit more complicated if they're 10 inches away from you, like maybe say you're trying to do a camel charge, because your heroes will charge in and then they'll be too far away for the rest of your camels to benefit, but that's something you can work out in game. Otherwise, for the most part though, this bonus is one I would never go without. Now with this bonus, you are also highly resistant to being broken. Normally when an army breaks, one of the classic things to do, especially against a low courage army, is to tag their heroes, get in combat with them, and that way they can't perform standfast. Well, in this case, your opponent will accidentally make you auto standfast. You've just made everything fearless, so you're not going anywhere. So hero hunting is going to be a priority on your opponent's end. And that can be a little difficult depending on what heroes you put in there. If you have a tribe master that's kind of sitting in the back only performing heroic moves and heroic marches, then you can at least leave one available so that way he can still perform those functions. So the next thing we have to go into is you have strong generic heroes. Your king and tribe masters are actually pretty powerful. The king gets an honorable mention, fight 5, strength 5, 3 attacks, lance. I mean, this guy is actually pretty brutal for a 90-point fully kitted out sort of warrior. And so I can absolutely say you really want one of these guys, at least maybe 2 even, depending on the size of your list, depending on where you're at. And then the other thing you're going to want is a tribe master. Now, tribe masters are not going to seem as effective. They're going to have a fight value 4 and 2 attacks. However, their access to heroic march is crucial, so you're definitely going to want that. However, they still boast a strength of 5 and a lance option with the camels. So I absolutely recommend taking them, and they can still pack a punch in the fight. The next thing we're going to get into is the Mummic Hill. Now, I'm not going to touch on that heavily in this video. I've decided to go ahead and save that for the Far Harad Legendary Legion, which actually has access to their Mummic War Leader. But it is a note that they do have access to Mummics. This is kind of more of a niche list, because once you have dedicated yourself to a Mummic, there are so many points that you really have to kind of build the list around them. So this is something that they have access to, but it probably won't be seen in most Far Harad lists. But they are still fantastic units. The next thing is the kings are on the same heroic tier as the tribe masters. Now that's only important because generally your kings are the ones who are going to be in combat. They are the heroic strikers. They are your guys with the high stat line. Well, because they're heroes of fortitude and your tribe masters are heroes of fortitude, you can make your tribe master your leader and your kings not your leader. So I think this is a mistake on GW's part. It doesn't seem like they should be the same heroic tier, but as of the new FAQ of the date of filming this video, March 3rd, 2019, they're still the same heroic tier, which means you can kind of cheeseball that system a little bit. So you almost should think of your Mahud kings not as kings, but champions. And that's probably a better way to look at them, and your tribe masters are the actual kings. So, of course, this goes right out the window if you choose the Mummic War Leader, but beyond doing that, you pretty much can feel free to make one of your tribe masters your hero and keep them in the back safe from harm. So with all of those fantastic pros of the army, we got to talk about the cons of this list, and there are many. So first off, you have an overpriced main unit. Your Mahud warriors are 1 point more than a Morannon orc for 1 less defense. So that seems a little bit bizarre. I imagine that point structure was to prevent you from spamming blowpipes too heavily. And so what I would recommend is if you're going to take the main Mahud unit, you definitely want to take blowpipes because that's the only real thing that makes them stand out. The next thing you have to think about is the fact that you're often going to have lower numbers than your opponent. Now this comes key because of the defense issue that we'll talk about in a second, but you will be affording highly priced camels, highly priced half-trolls, and possibly even an extremely highly priced Mummikill. What this means is that you're generally in an average game of 40 models, you're going to have a little bit less, maybe about 30. And so you're going to have to look at the fact that you're going to really want to piecemeal or use your elite units to tear through your opponents quickly. I think Camels help mitigate this problem quite a bit. With that lower numbers, you are fragile. Defense 5 across the board almost everywhere. Now, half trolls are a major exception to this. Half trolls are defense 6, 2 wounds, so they can easily stand their own. But if you're not going to spam those, then you do have defense 5 high-priced Camels and defense 5 high-priced Mahud warriors. We already discussed the Mahud warriors being a point higher than Moran and Orc in comparison. The Camels, if you compare them to a Warg rider, you'll see the exact same stats, but they're paying about 6 points more for those stats. And the reason why is, of course, the impact hits. So if you don't manage to get your impact hits to do anything, then you're paying an extremely high price for a profile that's not all that great. So that's something that you definitely have to keep in mind. Another thing is fight 3 on your core units. Once again, we're going to have to discount the half trolls. They are unusually powerful for an elite model, but your Camels and your Mahud warriors, and actually we even have to mention the Mumakil, are all low defense fight values. Your Mahud warriors are fight 3, which means often they will be losing fights against a more average fight of 4 across most other armies. So not only will you be losing fights, you will be dying if you lose the fights, and that will make a massive impact to your low numbers. So if that kind of stacks on itself, you have to make sure you kill faster than your opponent kills you. Next, we have low courage. Now, this gets mitigated a bit by the army bonus, but if you happen to have no heroes around, then this can become a nightmare. You're a courage of 2 on a high-priced unit. Orcs and goblins don't suffer from this because they can keep taking tests with different models. You won't have that luxury. Also, you're a little bit less flexible than those aforementioned units, so you're gonna need to make sure you have the courage problem mitigated. An alliance with Harad and a Warhorn could help with this a little bit. As I mentioned, they are historical alliances, so this is kind of an easy thing you can maybe pull off. But it is something you got to take into account. That low courage value is going to hurt, especially if you lose your heroes. And the next thing we got to go into is the limited character choices. Now, you have the King, and you have a Mummic, and then you have a Trimaster. That's really about it. And I have a lot of hero options. Now, you could say armies like Numenor and such have just as many, maybe less, but they have access to named characters who are on a budget very, very strong. Now, your only named character is 400 points starting off, and that's without the crew that mounts on top of the Howdah. So they can easily reach him about 500 points. So in lower point games, you're playing with only generic heroes. Luckily, this is not too much of an issue because your king is extremely powerful, or champions as I like to call them. So the next thing you have to note is that if you're playing a high cav army, you are more dependent than normal cav armies on going first. Now, there is a way to mitigate this. In the how to play video part of this video, I'm going to go ahead and discuss that. But you want to go first because you're paying so many points for the impact hit. Most cavalry are not paying for that. So if you compare yourself to the cost of, like I say, a Rohan Rider, if they don't charge, then they're not losing as much. So you definitely want to charge as much as possible if you play cav heavy. The next thing is you have no long range, which means that you are going to your opponent if they have any bows at all. So you're going to have to bring the fight to them. Now, I mentioned you can stop 12 inches away. Your opponent could back up. They could play that game a little bit with you. You might end up finding that you're just going to have to use heroic marches just to get into combat as quickly as possible, especially if you're playing against elves, where elven bowfire will rip you to shreds. The next thing is frail against magic. You have no named characters that can resist magic with 3 will a little easier. Instead, you have kings and tribe masters with 1 and 2 will. And this can get a little bit painful if you are bombarded by magic too much. So you're going to have to be a little overly aggressive in making sure that magic doesn't tear apart your lines or your heroes. So let's go into the how to play part of this video. And there's 3 really main ways to kind of play this army that I found. You can kind of mix it up a little bit, but let's go into it. The first one is if you're going to go ahead and use the regular Mahud troops, I would highly recommend first outfit them all with blowpipes. Just do that. You're going to want that kind of range advantage. All right, you can choose to bring the Betrayer into your list to make sure that you get the more powerful version, which is you reroll all failed wound rolls. This is something I would recommend personally, but it does cut down on your numbers a lot. So I would only do this in probably 700+ point games. If you're not trying to take that hit on your numbers, then you want to make sure you have at least a tribe master or two to have those access to heroic marches, and then fit everyone else as kings. I would still put in a handful of half trolls and a handful of camels. They are going to give you that hard-hitting power that you're definitely going to need, especially the camels. The camels can dismount heroes. If you have Emer hero running through your ranks, it is going to be extremely painful if you don't have a camel that can just knock him off his horse really quick. And remember, they can do this without needing to actually fight Emer hero, which is so important, or any named character on a horse. The other thing you're going to want is half trolls, mostly to kind of like blockade or stop like other elite models from tearing you apart. And by elite models, I'm often talking about like 2 attack units that are actually pretty strong. Half trolls can deal with them pretty effectively. They can also rip through an opponent's line. You're going to want a couple of these, even if not just more than a doorstop on an enemy hero that can cause them problems if they don't heroic strike or something like that. It can make them burn resources. So next, if you're going to play more elites than normal warriors, what you can do is a half troll front line. This is actually going to cost a pretty healthy amount of points, but then you can give, like, let's say 12, and then 12 spearmen behind them. Give them blowpipes, so that way you can, once again, dictate the mid-range, and then have camels with support options. I've played this list against many, many different lists. It even worked against a Radagast list where he was constantly casting Nature's Wrath. It's a highly aggressive list. The half trolls with the spear support and a banner bonus, if you can get it, which I would recommend, means that you have 4 dice to throw at the enemy. Now, to get that banner bonus, I often recommend allying in Suladan, which I'll get into the allies, but you can just bring normal banners, of course. And if you're going to play my favorite version of the list, which is the all-camel version of the list, then I would recommend, if you're not going to ally, to get Suladan, which I absolutely would do, because when you only have 1 attack, when you're getting counter-charged, and, it's really helpful to make sure your camels survive that assault. But if you don't, I would say 2 kings and a tribe master will get you what you need. You at least want 1 heroic march, and then the kings can start putting in a lot of work on the enemy heroes and such. The camel version of this list requires a lot of delicate play. You can't just line up like a normal cav army. You actually have to create cavalry-sized bases in between your front lines. So here's what I'm saying about that. Let's say your opponent has another cav army or an infantry army or whatever. What you can do is you can put a couple bait camels up in the front, all right? Still out of range if they're infantry, maybe 7 inches away. But if they're cavalry, put them up in the front. But keep cavalry-sized bases in between each camel. What this does is in the next turn, when it's time to go first or second, if your opponent goes first and say you don't have to call a heroic move in this case, they'll charge into your front line. Great. They charge in, maybe they even weave through your gaps that you just created. But what you've allowed now is your back rank camels to charge through those gaps to kill everything that charged you. The best part about doing that is every model that time you kill models that have already engaged you, you free up that model that got charged to move anyway. So a lot of people think that if you got charged at all in a turn, you cannot move, but that's not true. It's only if you are still charged. So the other camels come through, they weave in, they kill the models that engaged you, and then those models can move. And they have, of course, a longer range because they were in the front rank. So if that sounds a little bit complicated, I can create kind of a bat rep where I kind of demonstrate this type of action. But that's so important, really spacing your camels out to weave and bob through your ranks. If you can do that effectively, you can create multiple cav charge situations even if you didn't go first. And if you do go first, well, now your front line is threatening them where they can charge in. So they're going to feel the pressure to use the heroic move, but you are not going to. And that's so important because, like I said, you need to go first with this army once the combat really gets intermingled. Going first means you can activate your impact hits. You going first means so much more than your opponent going first. So you want to try to practice ways that can allow you to feel okay if you don't go first. So that's the army of camels. I would highly recommend having camels in any list. I think camels are easily one of the strongest units that this army has going for it as far as versatility. The next thing we got to mention, though, is alliances. Now, I touched on it a lot. First off, Harad is a fantastic ally. You have Suladan. Suladan is the best choice for an ally, easily hands down. He can Heroic Strike, he can Heroic March, which means you can now bring kings instead of tribe masters. He has a banner, an actual banner. Most things give banner bonuses, but don't count as a banner for the purposes of the mission. He covers that. And not only does he have a banner, he has a 6-inch banner. That really helps with this low fight value army. The next thing we have to note about him, great standfast. He's an ascendant of kings and therefore has a 12-inch standfast. So now you don't have to worry about if your heroes get headhunted too much. He can hold the army together. He has 3 might. He is a hero of legend, which means he can bring in cheaper troops, and he has an auto standfast on the first turn that you are broken. Guys, this is a winner for a low cost. I mean, I absolutely would always take this guy if you're going to ally at all, and in most lists, I generally bring him. The Betrayer is another solid choice. You get a Ring Wraith, which is good anti-magic, especially anti-Nature's Wrath, which I think will be popular in the meta of these days, given how easy Nature's Wrath is to cast on the characters that have it. But he is a transfixing, compelling, allows you to control the battlefield a little bit better, and he affects your blowpipes. So even in an all-camel mounted list, he can affect their blowpipes, and an all-infantry list, he can affect theirs. He's great all-around cumber of the list. I would say these two, if you mix in Serpent Guard, they will give you the Fight 4 that you're looking for. Cheaper units, you can get Haradrim Bowman, 3-up shoot value, but gives you that 24-inch range to allow your opponent to come to you. Warhorn options, you even have some hard hitters like Akraban Guard and such. I mean, Harad is a fantastic ally, and the fact that they're historical is perfect for this army. I would not give up this army bonus if I could avoid it. And I think Harad gives you so much to work with that they can really, they really kind of make it where you don't really need to. Now, if let's say you want to ensure you bring your opponent to you, you could try Mordor out, bring in some war catapults, maybe bring in some cheap spammable troop options and such like that, maybe harder hitting ring race. You'll lose your bonus, but as long as you come up with something to mitigate the fact that you have low courage, maybe those are not the guys charging. Maybe you have Mahud in the back ranks and Black Numenorians in the front rank or something of that sort. I'm not saying necessarily that's a good idea. I've not tested that. But if you did that sort of action, then you've mitigated the courage issue. And so that might be one way to go about it. Then you get the strength 4 of the Far Harad combined with their blowpipes. Otherwise, just take Moran and Orcs if you don't want the blowpipes. So other than that, like I said, about the mummics, there is a way to play the list with mummics effectively using bubble wrapping techniques and different movement strategies and such. I'm going to go into that in the Far Harad Legion. I'm going to actually kind of analyze them as if they're their own faction, because that's effectively what it is. So go for that video, which will come out very soon if you want more information on that. So let's go into the how to buy section of this video, and this is going to be a little bit brutal. So I'm going to talk in American dollars because I am American, and the brutal part about it is this is an all-metal army. You have no plastics anywhere. So I'm going to first teach you how to start with more of a 500-point force. After 500 points, I would recommend starting to ally with Harad in order to boost your numbers up, and then over time you can kind of collect more things. So let's go into 500-point armies. First off, you have a $26.50 for 2 camels. Now, I'm only saying 2 because what you're going to do is you're going to proxy these guys as Mahud Tribe Masters or Kings. Just paint them up real nice, ornate them, use some green stuff in conversions and whatnot. You do not need to buy Mahud Kings right now. You can, they're slightly more money, but this is a budget way of doing it. Then you're going to want to, now that's going to give you 160 points off the back if you say 1 king, 1 Mahud chieftain. Let's say you're going for a 500-point list, that would be about effective. Next, you're going to want to spend $30 on 4 half trolls. That's going to be packs. Well, so it's 2 packs of half trolls coming in with 4 because they come in packs of 2. Now that's going to give you 92 points to play with right there. That's the best part about them. They really inflate the numbers and give you an effective unit at the same time. $90 will then get you 6 packs of Mahud Spearmen. That is 18 Spearmen. Of course, all of them, you can just say they all have blowpipes, and that makes that go right there. That will be 180 points since they're, 10 points apiece. And then that will pretty much give you a 432-point army. After that, I would highly recommend starting to go into Harad. I would start, if you're going to do Harad, get the Serpent King, Suladan. And I think he's a fantastic addition to the army at almost any points level, but If you don't want to go that route, then maybe you can start to get a few more half trolls just to kind of mix up your numbers a little bit. But or maybe a few more camels, since you don't really have any camels in the list I just described to you. I would absolutely recommend, if you're going to start to flesh out this list that I just gave you, start to move toward the camels direction. You want to get maybe about 6 to 8 of those. They're going to be kind of expensive at $13-25 a piece. Of course, all these prices are at the beginning of this, the beginning of March here, 2019. So just keep that in mind. Prices fluctuate. eBay will not help too much. This army was not cheap before, so you're not going to see a lot of them on sale on eBay, but you know, of course you can try that option. If you want to go the extremely cheap route and you don't live in an area where they enforce GW miniatures only, then you could get Zulu warriors from many different historical lines and such. I believe Perry Miniatures actually has Zulu warriors. This is where you're going to find models that look almost exactly like the same thing. I mean, hell, I can almost say these models were probably modeled off of Zulu MP warriors. You get the same thing, but just packs of them. So this would be an easier way for you to get you a larger army. Most tournaments don't mind you doing this sort of thing. However, if you are going to bigger ones, Nova, Articon, such like that, then you're probably going to want the real thing. Warhammer World GT, most specifically. Of course, you can't enter that without GW models. Well, anyway, guys, that wraps it up for this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions about the Far Harad faction. I love this faction. I think it is far more competitive than it used to be, especially with the Camels being able to run through models where they couldn't before. And let me know what you guys feel I should review next, and I hope to talk to you all very soon.